When we see this, we see a phenomenon. A blur of impossible spins, a gravity-defying lean, a single sequined glove that captivated billions. We see a star that seemed born of pure, unadulterated magic. An artist so transcendent, it felt like he was delivered to us from another plane of existence, fully formed. A prodigy, a genius, an icon. But what if I told you that the greatest entertainer of all time wasn't born? He was built. He was built in lonely, grueling dance rehearsals that wore grooves into the floorboards. He was built in obsessive late-night songwriting sessions, humming entire orchestras into a cheap tape recorder. He was built through a set of daily, meticulous, and almost painfully intense rituals that forged a legend, note by note, step by step. Today, we're not just looking at the magic, we're deconstructing it. We're pulling back the velvet curtain to expose the gears of the machine. This is the unseen story of the sweat, the sacrifice, and the unwavering discipline. These are Michael Jackson's daily habits that created a legend. The foundation, forged in the fire of the Jackson 5. To understand the man who would become the king of pop, you have to start in a cramped two-bedroom house in Gary, Indiana, because the work ethic that would later define Michael Jackson wasn't a choice he made as an adult. It was a condition of his survival as a child. The story of Michael's legendary discipline begins not with inspiration, but with fear. His father, Joe Jackson, a former boxer and crane operator with his own deferred musical dreams, ran the Jackson 5 less like a family band and more like a military unit. The word rehearsal doesn't quite capture the reality. These were grueling, relentless drills that could last for hours after school, day in and day out. While other kids were playing outside, the Jackson brothers were inside, perfecting harmonies, tightening choreography, and facing the unforgiving scrutiny of their father. For Joe, perfection wasn't the goal, it was the baseline. A misstep or a flat note wasn't just a mistake, it was a failure, often met with harsh punishment. Michael would later speak of this time with a profound sense of loss, acknowledging the stolen childhood and the terror he felt with his father holding a belt, watching his every move. That ever-present threat created a psychological imprint that would fuel him for the rest of his life, an insatiable need to get it right. He learned, under the most brutal circumstances, that the only way to avoid the pain of failure was to work so hard that failure was simply not an option. This environment, while traumatic, forged a level of discipline that was almost superhuman. In a handwritten note, a young Michael scrawled his intentions with a chilling clarity. "I will be a perfectionist, a researcher, a trainer, a masterer. I will be better than every great actor roped into one." This wasn't some idle daydream. It was a mission statement born from a deep-seated need to control his destiny, to transform himself from a frightened boy into an untouchable ideal. Even as a child, he was already a student of the game. He learned that being good wasn't good enough. You had to be captivating. He would stand in the wings of theaters like the Apollo, not just waiting for his turn, but studying. He watched every move of the master, James Brown, analyzing how he commanded the stage and mesmerized an audience. He later said, "Ever since I was a small child, my mother would wake me, no matter what time it was, to watch the television to see the master at work." He wasn't just watching, he was absorbing. He was cataloging every spin, every split, every guttural scream. He was building a mental library of greatness. This early habit of obsessive study, born from the pressure cooker of his family band, became the bedrock of his entire creative philosophy. One of his most enduring pieces of advice was, "Study the greats and become greater." It was a principle he learned before he was even a teenager. The Jackson 5 were a phenomenon, but for Michael they were also a training ground. The long hours, the immense pressure, the constant demand for excellence, it was a baptism by fire. It instilled in him a work ethic that bordered on the obsessive and the belief that talent was nothing without relentless, punishing work. This foundation, laid in Gary, Indiana, under the watchful, intimidating eye of his father, was both the source of his deepest pain and the engine of his greatest triumphs. It created a man who would work like there was no tomorrow, because he was trained from childhood to believe that his very worth depended on it. The divine songwriting method, catching songs from God. If the foundation of Michael Jackson's work ethic was forged in harsh reality, his creative process was born from a place that felt like pure magic. It's one of the most fascinating paradoxes of his genius. Here was a musician who couldn't read or write a single note of traditional music, a composer who never formally studied theory. And yet, he created some of the most complex, sonically rich songs in pop history. How? He believed the songs were given to him. He called himself a vessel, an antenna for melodies that flowed from a divine source. In his own words, you don't write the music, let the music write itself. He felt the songs already existed in their perfect form somewhere in the cosmos, and his job was just to get out of the way and let them come through him. This divine dictation meant songs could arrive at any moment, fully formed in his head. The process was entirely intuitive and vocal. It didn't start with a piano or a guitar, it started with his voice. Michael would hear the entire song, every bass note, every string swell, every horn stab, and perform it a cappella into a simple cassette tape recorder. Imagine him, alone, building a symphony of sound using only his mouth. He'd lay down the beat first, beatboxing the entire drum pattern. Then he'd layer over it, singing the bass line, that iconic driving pulse that is the spine of so many of his hits. Then came the guitar chords, the keyboard pads, the string arrangements, and finally the melody. He was a one-man orchestra. His longtime engineer, Bruce Swedien, and producer Quincy Jones would receive these raw vocal blueprints, and their job was to translate the sounds from Michael's head into the instruments in the studio. The birth of Billie Jean is the perfect example of this in action. The song began with that bass line. It came to him while riding in his car, and the hypnotic groove took over his mind so completely that he became oblivious to the world. As he later recounted, he was so lost in the song in his head that he didn't even notice the bottom of his Rolls-Royce was on fire. A passing motorcyclist had to shout, "Your car's on fire," before he snapped out of it. He was so consumed by the tune in his head that he nearly died for it, but he had caught the song. When he brought the demo to Quincy Jones, it was already a force of nature. Jones, a master producer, initially had his doubts. He thought the intro was too long and wanted to change the title to Not My Lover, fearing people would think it was about tennis player Billie Jean King. But Michael was resolute. He knew what the song had to be. On the intro, he insisted, "That's the part that makes me want to dance." He won that argument. On the title, he refused to budge. He felt the song in his bones. It was his vision, channeled from that other place. He wrote dozens, sometimes hundreds of songs for each album, all captured through this method of vocal layering. For the Bad album, he reportedly had around 80 songs ready. For Dangerous, another 60. The ones that didn't make the cut went into a vault, a treasure trove of melodies captured from the ether. In the studio, he rarely, if ever, used lyric sheets. He would stay up the night before a session, memorizing every word, so that when he stepped up to the microphone, the song was already a part of him. Engineer Bruce Swedien recalled how Michael would often record his vocals in complete darkness, allowing him to shut out the world and fully embody the music. He would dance, snap his fingers, and physically perform the song as he sang, pouring every ounce of emotion into the take. He wasn't just singing words, he was channeling a feeling. And that belief, that the music was a sacred gift, is what infused his work with a sense of destiny that you can still feel today. The obsessive rehearsal, the marathon dance day. If Michael's songwriting was a spiritual act, his dancing was a brutal, physical one. It was here, in the dance studio, that divine inspiration met the punishing reality of earthly limits, limits he was determined to shatter. The effortless grace, the liquid-like movement, the defiance of gravity, none of it was effortless. It was purchased with sweat, pain, and an almost fanatical amount of time. During periods of intense preparation, a rehearsal day wasn't a 1 or 2 hour affair. It could be an 8 or 9 hour marathon. The dance studio was his sanctuary and his torture chamber, where he pushed his body to its absolute breaking point and then pushed further. A choreographer who worked with him said he would practice the same move in front of a mirror for hours, hundreds of times, until it was not just perfect, but second nature. Think about that. Not just running a routine, but isolating a single movement, a spin, a kick, a shoulder pop, and repeating it until it was etched into his muscle memory. There are stories from his time at Neverland Ranch that a spot on his wooden dance floor was worn down into a concave bowl, a physical scar from the thousands of spins he executed on that exact spot. This obsessive practice was about more than just choreography. These marathon sessions were for physical conditioning, giving him the superhuman stamina for a 2-hour show without seeming to lose his breath. The studio was also his laboratory. It was in these long, solitary hours that he experimented and invented. The moonwalk is the most famous example. He didn't invent the move. It was a street dance known as the backslide. But he was the one who perfected it, polished it, and unleashed it on the world at Motown 25 in 1983. That single, electrifying moment was the result of countless hours of refinement. He learned the move from other dancers, but made it his own, adding a layer of impossible smoothness that made it look like he was walking on air. The same is true for the famous 45-degree anti-gravity lean from the Smooth Criminal video. That wasn't just a camera trick. It was a feat of engineering and physical strength. He co-invented and patented a special shoe with a slot in the heel that would hitch onto a peg on the stage, allowing him and his dancers to perform the lean. But the device was only half the battle. It still required immense core strength and precise balance to execute. That strength was built during those endless hours of practice. His collaborators were consistently in awe of his dedication. During rehearsals for the This Is It tour, his work ethic was as fierce as ever. His longtime manager noted he approached every rehearsal as if it were the final performance, demanding the same precision from himself and everyone around him. He was kind to his dancers, but his standards were absolute. As collaborator Brad Buxer said, Michael's philosophy was simple. If you don't sweat, there's nothing. This relentless drive was his way of showing love for his audience. He felt a profound responsibility to give people a sense of magic, and he knew that magic was only possible through meticulous, painstaking preparation. What the world saw as a godlike performer gliding effortlessly was in reality a man who had dedicated his life to the grind. The mind of a perfectionist. Study the greats to become the greatest. Michael Jackson's genius wasn't just in the music or the dance moves. It was driven by an insatiable scholarly curiosity. He was as much a researcher as he was a performer. His daily habits included not just physical labor and spiritual songwriting, but also the intellectual rigor of obsessive study. He famously said, "The greatest education in the world is watching the masters at work," and he lived by that mantra. His primary field of study was greatness itself. From a young age, he was a voracious consumer of performance, deconstructing the magic of his idols. His father may have forced him to watch James Brown, but Michael turned it into a lifelong academic pursuit. He didn't just admire James Brown's energy, he analyzed it. He studied how Brown used his body as a percussive instrument, how he controlled a crowd's emotions with a single scream. He even got angry when TV cameras cut away from James Brown's feet because he was trying to decode the source of his power. His curriculum of greatness was diverse. He was deeply influenced by the elegant, weightless grace of Fred Astaire, to whom he dedicated his autobiography, Moonwalk. He watched old movie musicals endlessly, studying how Astaire and Gene Kelly used dance not just as a spectacle, but as storytelling. The cinematic ambition of his own short films, like Smooth Criminal, can be traced directly back to his study of these legends. But his studies went beyond dancers. He was a student of Charlie Chaplin's ability to convey deep emotion without words. He also studied the creative empire of Walt Disney, another master of creating immersive worlds.
He wasn't just trying to be a great singer or dancer, he was trying to become a master storyteller, an architect of fantasy. This analytical mindset permeated every aspect of his work. In the studio, this came out as a relentless perfectionism that could be both inspiring and maddening. He was obsessed with sonic clarity. His longtime engineer, Bruce Sweden, tells the story of mixing Billie Jean 91 times. After weeks of obsessive tweaking, a weary Quincy Jones finally told them to listen to the second mix. They did, and it was perfect. The final version on the album is mix number 2. This drive wasn't about ego, it was about matching the song to the perfect version he heard in his head. He once said, "If it's not right, you throw it away and do it over." That's the difference between a number 30 record and a record that stays number 1 for weeks. This philosophy applied to everything. He would personally approve every lighting cue, every costume detail, every sound effect. He would watch tapes of his own performances with the critical eye of a coach reviewing game film, pointing out tiny flaws no one else would ever notice. This habit of deep study and relentless perfectionism was the bridge between his raw talent and his legendary status. He understood that genius wasn't just about having brilliant ideas, it was about having the discipline to execute them at the highest level possible. He was never satisfied. Even as the biggest star on the planet, he was still that kid in the wings, studying, learning, and striving. He didn't just want to be great. He wanted to be the greatest, and he was willing to do the homework. This level of dedication is a blueprint for greatness in any field. It's a reminder that the magic we admire is always built on a foundation of work. If you found this deep dive into the mind of a genius inspiring and you want more stories that break down how legends are made, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We have many more stories of iconic creators on the way, and you won't want to miss them. The legacy of labor. So, what's the ultimate lesson from the daily life of Michael Jackson? When we strip away the myth and the blinding sparkle of the sequin glove, we're left with a simple, profound, and somewhat intimidating truth. Greatness is a choice. It's a daily decision. It's the decision to treat your craft not as a job, but as a spiritual calling. It's the decision to hum a bass line into a tape recorder because you believe it's a message from the universe. It's the decision to spend hours in a dance studio paying for impossible grace with excruciating effort. It's the decision to study the masters, not to copy them, but to understand the DNA of their excellence so you can build something greater. The image of Michael Jackson that endures is one of supernatural talent. But the reality is that his genius was not a passive gift. It was an active, relentless, and often painful pursuit. His entire life was a daily ritual dedicated to the refinement of his art. He believed in perfection, and he was willing to sacrifice everything to chase it. He once said, "Work like there's no tomorrow. Train, strive. I mean, really train and cultivate your talent to the highest degree. Be the best at what you do." That was his code. The magic he created on stage was not an illusion. It was the visible result of a lifetime of invisible labor. It was the culmination of thousands of hours of practice, thousands of takes in the studio, and an unwavering commitment to a standard of excellence most of us can barely comprehend. The legend of the King of Pop wasn't just written in the recording studio or on the concert stage. It was written in the quiet, unseen moments, in the sweat, the focus, and the daily obsessive habits that took a profoundly gifted boy from Gary, Indiana, and meticulously, deliberately built him into a legend.